Do you want to know more about how you can eat for better health and longevity, and how your diet and lifestyle can play a part in chronic disease? Then you're in the right place. I'm Claire Day.
And I'm Daisy Lund, and we are both plant-based doctors with a passion for improving nutritional education. In this podcast, we will bring you all the latest medical evidence on how a plant-based diet can improve your health whilst being kinder to the planet and fairer to the animals that we share it with.
Twice a month, we bring you interviews from experts in the field with a focus on an important topic related to plant-based health, all while sharing recipes and food ideas.
So, welcome to In a Nutshell, the Plant-Based Health Professionals podcast. Welcome everybody to episode 2 of series 2 of The Nutshell. Good morning, Claire. So I know you met Dr. Michael Greger this week in London. How was that?
Well, I would like to say you didn't miss much, but I absolutely loved his talk and lots of things have stuck with me as he's very funny and that makes things easier to remember.
Yeah.
It's fair to say he's got a lot of groupies though, and I fear I may have looked like one of them because in order to get the book signed, I had to leave the building with him and a few other people at his invitation, but we had to follow him up the street in the rain while he continued to sign books because there was such a demand for that.
Brilliant. I love it. So you were following him outside the talk. And what were the highlights from his talk?
Quite a few, but one thing that stuck with me and perhaps the most spontaneous thing was his response to a question on personalised nutrition, as in somebody just sort of asked him what he thought about it. And I think it would be easy to think that with all his referencing to seemingly very small studies and ones where, you know, they may not be statistically significant and more research is needed, that he's open to people following very specific diet plans. But it actually doesn't seem like that way at all, because the small studies that he highlights are often simply to challenge our assumptions about big pharma, making the point that research on a particular plant food, for example, doesn't really get done on a big scale if there's no drug to sell at the end of it. And so with these illustrations, he's out to just move things in the general direction of the power of whole foods for all.
Right. Okay. So he wasn't actually that into personalised nutrition.
I don't think so. He joked about it, suggesting that it appeals to people who like to spend money on a printout that makes them feel that they're special and that it's personal to them. And of course, what I took from that was that it's great news on this podcast because we're all about challenging the injustices of health inequalities, which are too often associated with differences in wealth.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the jury's still out, isn't it, on personalised nutrition? But you do wonder at the rate that some are charging for that information, and with the marketing of some products, it does feel a bit like a commercial venture. But let's see. There may be a place for it.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't stop us using any good advice that comes out of it on this podcast.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we're open to all good advice about health and nutrition. That's what we're here for. So this week we have an interview with Paula Hallam. Paula is a paediatric dietitian and the author of a recently published book, Plant-Powered Little People. Absolutely love that title. She is a fantastic source of knowledge about how to plan diets for children and what we should consider when raising children plant-based.
We really enjoyed chatting with Paula.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we covered so much information. I had to actually go back and listen and take notes, which I'm going to put in my yearly appraisal folder. So yeah, we discussed all sorts, didn't we, Claire? We started with babies, breastfeeding versus formula feeding and how to do that plant-based, through to weaning, toddler years, and then on to older children. So really fascinating.
Yeah, and I've got her book on my desk at work and I've been able to sort of share it widely. Have you found it for anyone in particular, Daisy?
Yeah. I've been suggesting it as a resource to anyone raising children, not just plant-based families. You know, I think increasingly people are interested in eating more plant-based, whether that's for their health, for environmental reasons, or for animal welfare considerations. I think it's a brilliant resource for anyone who's raising children. We know that cases of obesity in the UK are continuing to rise, particularly in children, and that poor diets are part of that. So diets high in fat, sugar, and ultra-processed food. So this is really a fantastic resource for people who want to eat more plant-based and eat healthier.
Yeah. I mean, if I've got a dad brings in a child and I think, oh, you know, he could do with losing some weight or something like that, I'm convinced that any parent who's at that point taken an interest in their child will improve their own eating and, of course, their health as a result. And I haven't got round to making it yet, but I'm going to have a go at Paula's green pasta sauce with edamame beans. So listen to the end.
Yeah. So let's go over to Paula now. But for those who may have additional questions for her, you could always join her online webinar as well through the Plant-Based Health Professionals UK. So that's happening on the 8th of February. And don't forget, the webinars are free to members, so you don't have to be a healthcare professional to join the Healthcare Professionals UK. Anyone can join, and we'll add a link in the show notes. So bring your live questions to Paula on the 8th of February.
Yeah. And lastly, we'd like to mention another book covering nutrition by another plant-based health professionals member, Miriam Martinez Biach. Is that right, Daisy? I don't want to let her down in the pronunciation of her surname, but you're a Spanish speaker.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Miriam, I hope we've got that right.
Yeah. Well, the book's called Mi Familia Vegana. Yeah, that's my vegan family, I think. And this one's in Spanish. So for all our Spanish listeners out there, we will add a link to the show notes too. And the book covers children and from pregnancy, but it's also got a chapter on older age. And we're incredibly lucky to have such expertise in Miriam, who is a paediatric consultant in London.
Yeah. Now, over to the rest of the show.
This week on In a Nutshell, we are joined by Paula Hallam, a registered children's dietitian and plant-based dietitian expert. Welcome to the podcast, Paula.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Lovely to meet you. Now, can you tell us more about your career background and how that in particular led you to specialise in plant-based nutrition and the paediatric nutrition?
Sure, of course. So I grew up in Cape Town and always been really interested in food, cooking, and I used to spend a lot of time in the kitchen with my mum, and she used to always, sort of teach me about what she was making. So I guess I always just had that interest in sort of food and cooking from quite an early age. And then my dad was a scientist. He worked in metallurgy. So I think science as well was also just sort of in me and something I was always interested in. One of my subjects at school included an element of nutrition. So it really sort of sparked my interest from a really quite a young age. So when I finished school, went to university, studied a science degree in sort of biochemistry, which I really enjoyed, but really felt that I wanted to work with people. I love people. I love working with people. I'm very chatty. So just really wanted that element. So nutrition was the sort of next step that I took. And so I did a postgrad in nutrition and dietetics. So that sort of led me to study nutrition and dietetics. In terms of the pediatrics and then sort of plant-based, pediatrics, always been so fascinated by that. When I was a student, always knew that pediatrics was something I wanted to specialize in. It just fascinated me. It was always my favorite topic. All the case studies we did, I just found fascinating. I think it's just that working in a multidisciplinary team, working with a family, seeing children grow and develop, and just working in a team and working with a family is so rewarding. And so I always just loved that. So as soon as I could, started a pediatric job, as early as I could when I moved to the UK. And then in the sort of plant-based side of things, it was actually my daughters that sort of led me there. So I've got 2 teenage daughters, and about 4 years ago or so, my daughter, who was 10 years old at the time, she came to me and said, "Mum, I really want to be vegetarian, don't want to eat meat anymore." So I was like, "Okay, fine, absolutely no problem. Let's look at this." And I started looking and reading and researching a bit more, obviously being a dietitian, taking a bit of a deep dive into it, and just discovered there's lots of information out there, but not very much for families, not very much about children, and not much sort of practical, information in terms of helping parents. And so that sort of started leading me towards plant-based nutrition, and I feel like my sort of professional and personal lives sort of collided a bit there, and I started helping other families that had approached me for help and advice with looking at their whole family's plant-based eating way of eating. So that's what sort of led me towards it.
Great. So I'm going to ask you, straight off, the main thing that we're talking about is obviously plant-based diets for children and raising them that way. And there seems to be really a lot of confusion amongst healthcare professionals about raising children plant-based and whether it's actually safe to do so.
Yeah.
So can you tell us more about what is the evidence-based guidance that we can share with anyone who's making the decision, be that a parent or whether it's actually someone who's involved in advising somebody on making a decision, so more of a healthcare professional? What evidence can we point them to in helping them make that decision about whether to raise their child plant-based?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I know that there can be quite a lot of confusion, can't there? And it definitely is safe. There are many, many organizations around the world, nutrition organizations, pediatric organizations, societies that agree that it is safe for all stages of life, including infants, pregnant women, breastfeeding women, and children and adolescents. So the British Dietetics Association has a specific statement where they say that it's definitely vegetarian and vegan diets are safe for all stages of life, as long as they're well planned, which is, the same for any sort of children's diet or nutrition that you're looking at. The American Dietetic Association, Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, have also got quite a detailed and comprehensive statement about it being safe. And they go a step further actually and say that it's even beneficial, that they feel it's beneficial. And they, name all the different life stages, including infancy and childhood. So I think it's definitely safe. Of course, there are certain nutrients that we need to think about, but that's, with any baby or young child that you're bringing up, thinking about their nutrition is important, whether they, no matter what sort of eating pattern that they are having, that the family is eating. So yes, we need to consider a few things about children's nutrition. Yes, we may need to consider supplements, may need to consider fortified foods, but it's no different really from any other diet, that we need to sort of consider those things.
Right. So we're talking a lot about planning diets today. And we thought maybe just thinking about children in terms of their age to structure things a bit. We think first about babies. So that's those under 12 months. We know, hopefully all of us know, that breastfeeding is ideal, but not everybody can. And for mums who can't, are there any nutritionally complete plant-based baby milks?
Okay, yeah, great question. So in the UK, we actually don't have a 100% fully vegan or plant-based infant formula. The closest we have is a soya infant formula. SMA soya infant formula is the only brand we have in the UK. There are lots of other brands of soya infant formula in other parts of the world. The reason it's not 100% plant-based is the source of vitamin D is from lanolin, which comes from sheep's wool. So it's considered vegetarian, but not vegan, but it's kind of the closest we have in terms of plant-based formulas. There are a few other ones available in other parts of Europe, in mainland Europe, which are based on rice hydrolysates, which are 100% plant-based. So there are other options for families if for whatever reason they didn't want to use soya, or if they wanted something that was definitely 100%. There is a cost, obviously, implication there in terms of the access to those formulas. But there, if anyone isn't able to breastfeed for whatever reason, there are, nutritionally adequate options out there, definitely.
That's great. Paula, can I just clarify that? Because I think, as Claire mentioned, a lot of healthcare professionals get really confused about the message of soya milk in the under ones. So we're saying that soya milk can be, well, I suppose it's formula soya milk can be given to babies who are bottle fed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you clarify?
Yes, that's right. So it's soya infant formula we're talking about here. No, yeah, just to clarify, so not the soya milk that you can buy in the supermarket. That's only appropriate for over ones. Just as unmodified cow's milk would not be appropriate for an under one. We would need an infant formula or breast milk, of course, for babies under the age of 12 months. The NHS does have like a statement, like a precautionary statement, that they don't recommend soya infant formula for babies under 6 months of age. But there's many statements from other organizations, so from BDA, for example, the British Dietetic Association Paediatric Group, acknowledging that for vegan mums, soya infant formula is the only nutritionally adequate, appropriate infant formula available. So it's safe and it is appropriate. And yeah, definitely the infant formula version, not the supermarket version. Yeah.
We noticed that on the NHS website as well. Do you think that will be changed given the fact that the BDA and other organisations are supporting
Yeah, I hope so. It does feel a bit sort of a little bit out of sync, but it's, yeah, hopefully that is something that will be reviewed. Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, I hope so, yeah. And in going sort of shifting slightly to bottle-fed babies who perhaps parents aren't vegan or vegetarian, but can't have dairy products for other reasons. I'm thinking about things like lactose intolerance or cow's milk protein. What do you say to those sort of situations?
Yeah, sure. So in a baby who has cow's milk protein allergy, there are lots of different formulas available. These are ones that are on prescription. So the first line treatment for babies with cow's milk protein allergy is usually an extensively hydrolyzed formula. So that's one where the protein has been broken down into smaller pieces, and so the baby's immune system doesn't recognize that particular protein to be cow's milk protein because it's been divided up. There's also amino acid formulas, which are, as the name sort of indicates, based on individual amino acids, which are the building blocks of. So again, the immune system of the little baby will not recognize those amino acids and won't react to them. So yeah, so those, and soya might be used as well in cow's milk protein allergy. It's just generally not the first line. It's usually the extensively hydrolyzed, which is the first line, and it also depends on lots of other factors. Are there other allergies? The age of the child, palatability, lots of things like that. So lots of things to consider, but yeah, an extensively hydrolyzed is usually the first line that we would look at in terms of a formula. In terms, you mentioned lactose intolerance. So just to I guess explain to everyone the difference between lactose intolerance and cow's milk protein allergy, because they're often sort of misinterpreted that they are same thing, and they really aren't. I think the confusion comes in because the one form of cow's milk protein allergy, the delayed form, used to be called cow's milk protein intolerance a number of years ago, and you still might sort of see that every now and again, which makes it sound confusing, but it shouldn't be called that. So in terms of the cow's milk protein allergy, that is a immune mediated reaction. So the immune system of a baby or young child will recognize the cow's milk protein and sort of inappropriately react to it. So anyone else who doesn't have an allergy, if they drink milk, they wouldn't have any kind of reaction. But for little ones who have an allergy, they would develop symptoms. So that could be symptoms to do with their skin, so like a rash, hives, itching, eczema, things like that, or to do with their gut, vomiting, diarrhea, or colicky symptoms or pain, discomfort. And in severe cases, it can affect their breathing and their circulation. But those are extremely rare for that to happen, especially in babies. And then in terms of lactose intolerance, that doesn't involve the immune system. So that's an enzyme deficiency, the lactase enzyme, which breaks down lactose. So lactose is the sugar or the carbohydrate in cow's milk. And in terms of an allergy, it's the protein, cow's milk protein allergy that the body reacts to. So it's different parts of the milk that the body is reacting to. And with lactose intolerance, it's only gut symptoms that babies or children or adults, if they have it, they will develop, and it's not anything to do with the immune system. It's very very rare in infants, and cow's milk protein allergy is much more common than lactose intolerance. The only time you tend to see lactose intolerance in children is after a bout of gastroenteritis, tummy bug sort of thing, some diarrhea, vomiting. Then the gut can be a bit damaged, and that lactase enzyme has been decreased or sort of completely sloughed away. So that's when you can get a temporary lactose intolerance. So yeah, I hope that helps people sort of understand the difference there.
Yeah, definitely. That's really helpful. Thanks, Paul. I think you're right. Lactose intolerance tends to be quite common in adults, isn't it? And
Sure,
that
yeah.
whole idea of actually after we're weaned, should we be drinking another species milk given the high levels of lactose intolerance in adults? But that'll probably be another episode.
Yes, sure.
Can we ask you a bit about breastfeeding then? We've gone through bottle-fed babies. For breastfeeding mums who are vegetarian or vegan, plant-based, are there any considerations that they need to think about when they are breastfeeding babies?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so for breastfeeding mums in general, there's no sort of, special diet or anything specific that they need to eat or do. They do have slightly higher energy requirements, so they might need an extra snack during the day. They have higher calcium requirements, so that's a consideration to really think about is that when you're breastfeeding is your calcium intake. In terms of plant-based breastfeeding mums, when I was writing my book, I had a look at this in quite a lot of detail. And the research shows that the nutritional quality of the breast milk of women who are omnivores versus women who are vegan or vegetarian, it's equally as nutritious. The quality is, as good. And the only thing that did find differences in is the fat profile. So like the types of fat that were found in the breast milk of women who were plant-based or vegan, and they found that there were lower levels of one of the types of fats, DHA, which is generally found in oily fish. And so obviously if those women weren't eating those things, then that particular type of fat was not as high in their breast milk as in other women who were eating oily fish. So that's one consideration, but the overall quality of the breast milk is absolutely fine. So absolutely, no difference in terms of the quality of the breast milk. So if a mum is plant-based, I think they should definitely consider a DHA supplement, so like an algal oil supplement, and a vitamin B12 supplement, as with everyone who's is plant-based or predominantly plant-based or vegan to take a vitamin B12 supplement. So those are the two that I think they should consider. All breastfeeding women, we do recommend a vitamin D supplement. So that would be something as with all breastfeeding women that plant-based breastfeeding mums should also consider.
Brilliant, that's good to know. We've got a whole episode on DHA and EPA, haven't we, Claire? So if somebody wants to know a bit more about supplementing that, so that you would recommend that for breastfeeding plant-based mums.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Great. Can I ask about weaning now? And I guess as GPs, we're when we're thinking about the traditional approach, it's introducing solids from about 6 months. Some people do it slightly earlier. Are there any differences that people should take into account when they're weaning their baby plant-based?
Okay, not really in terms of the age. So definitely the age or developmental stage. So it's usually around 6 months. But what I always talk to parents about is trying to look at your baby and not just the calendar. So look at your baby. What are they doing? What's their development? Are they able to sit with sort of minimal support? Are they able to support their head and their neck? Are they able to reach things, bring them to their mouth? Those sort of developmental signs. Are they ready for solids? And then in terms of what to introduce with plant-based families, this is a similar in terms of nutrients, there's a similar emphasis on iron-rich foods. So all babies need iron-rich foods because the stores that they were born with start depleting from birth, but they become quite depleted by 6 months, definitely. And so we want to introduce iron-rich foods in order to replenish those iron stores. And so for plant-based families, I guess what that means is obviously looking specifically at the iron-rich foods, iron-fortified cereals, beans, lentils, pulses, things like that they can introduce to the little one to make sure they've got good sources of iron. And then another thing I think that is not necessarily particular to plant-based families, but is something to consider is the sort of fat or energy sources, because a plant-based diet it is kind of naturally, sort of quite low energy, or can be, and some of the foods are naturally sort of quite low energy. So thinking about things like sources of fats, your avocado, your nut butters, seed butters, olive oil, things like that, so which of course all children can have in the diet, definitely, but I think a bit more proactively introducing those things, because some of the studies looking at plant-based children's growth, when looking at vegan, vegetarian, and omnivorous children in a study, for example, the Vici study, which was done in Germany on about 400 children, they found that some of the children, a very small percentage, but still we need to consider this, of the vegan children there were more vegan children and vegetarian children that were underweight than the omnivorous group. There's still very small numbers, but when they looked at those small numbers and looked at what they were eating in a little bit more detail, they hadn't been introduced enough sort of energy-rich foods. So Children can grow absolutely normally and absolutely very well on a plant-based diet. We just need to actively make sure that we're including those, energy-rich foods.
Right. So you mentioned nut butters and seed butters, and obviously that's a really important source of calories, and they're also really important in an adult plant-based diet. But is there any limit, or when can you actually safely introduce them for babies, and in what form? Does it have to be the butter?
Okay. Yeah, really great question. So yes, they're a really good source of, calories, fats, protein. So I really encourage families to introduce things like nuts and seeds. But yeah, in terms of the form, it could be ground nuts, it could be smooth nut butters, could be, seeds, depending on the size of them. If they're small enough, it's okay to introduce them just as they are. But obviously with larger seeds, for example, pumpkin seeds or things like sunflower seeds, things like that, either ground up or a sort of butter, a spreadable form would definitely be appropriate for little ones. So obviously whole nuts and large seeds are choking hazards. So we need to make sure that the form that we're offering is an appropriate form for little ones. But in terms of a food, really great food to introduce, and really encourage families to introduce those foods.
Can I ask, do you mean sort of straight away they can be introduced
All
from
right.
6
Sorry.
months?
Yes, we asked about the age as well. Yes. So from around 6 months, they can start introducing. We don't need to necessarily wait till a particular age or sort of later on. Yeah, as soon as they start weaning, they can start introducing those foods. Absolutely fine. Yeah.
Okay. Just a question coming from another angle now, really. When I was doing a talk to some GP registrars, one of the registrars said, well, this is all very well bringing up children plant-based, but what if, when they're old enough to make their own decisions, they don't want to be plant-based? Will they not have a problem starting to eat animal products then? So we wanted to ask you whether there was actually any evidence that not introducing animal products early on could lead children to be more allergic or at least intolerant of animal products later in life.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think there is actually a study that has specifically looked at that. We do know in general that introducing allergens, so just to explain to everyone what food allergens are. So any food in theory could cause an allergic reaction, but there are a number of food allergens, which are just the foods or food proteins, that what we call the top 9 food allergens, which are responsible for around about 90% of the food allergies that you see in young children. And so these top 9 food allergens are milk or dairy products, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, wheat, soya, sesame, fish, and shellfish. I hope I've got all 9 there.
Wow.
Counting them off. Yeah, counting them off. Yeah, so we know from studies that have been done in the last sort of a couple of years, the last decade or so, that particularly the LEAP study and the EAT study, that introducing food allergens, particularly peanuts and eggs, those are the two that we particularly sort of peanuts first, the most evidence, and then sort of still quite a lot, but not as much evidence for eggs. Introducing those that they're within the first year of life, so between 6 and 12 months, that may help to prevent food allergies from developing later on. But obviously it's no guarantee. There's nothing 100%, and there are a lot of factors involved in whether a child develops a food allergy or not. Some genetic factors, environmental factors, probably factors that we don't know about yet or haven't, studied. So I think there's a lot to consider, and it's not only the fact that a child has or hasn't had a particular type of food when they're younger. One thing that I would say is that if people are considering introducing, let's take eggs for example, they don't eat eggs really as a family, but they are thinking, okay, I'll introduce them to my baby just to see that they're not allergic, and just as a sort of precautionary type thing. If families are considering doing that, what I would say is that just introducing eggs or any food allergen just once or twice isn't really sort of enough. So if they are introduced, they need to be given on a regular basis, so on a weekly basis, and we don't really know for how long, but it might likely be several years. And so I think families, obviously it's a very personal decision, but I think families need to consider, is that doable? Are we comfortable with doing that? And if not, then it's probably better not to introduce them at all if they're not able to provide them on a regular basis for not able to, or not, they don't feel comfortable with doing that. So I think it's a tricky one, and we don't necessarily have a definite answer. I can't tell you, I can't say, no, they're definitely not going to develop an allergy even if you don't introduce something. And if you do introduce something, the chances of an allergy are less, but it's doesn't mean it's a guarantee either. So I think there's a lot for parents to consider there, that the child's food allergy risk factors, how they feel about continuing to offer that food on a regular basis. So I think it's kind of thinking of those things.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you come to something like the cow's milk protein allergy in babies, there's such an effort made by the NHS basically to put families, in touch with a milk ladder dietitian so that they actually make a full effort to start that exposure, and sort of almost like it's a process that families feel they have to go through, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the milk ladder is a sort of stepwise reintroduction of cow's milk protein for children specifically who've got a cow's milk protein allergy. So it's not necessarily for everyone. It's for children who have got a diagnosed cow's milk protein allergy, and then it's a sort of reintroduction, and it may not be appropriate for all children, depending on the type, if they've got immediate type allergy or delayed type allergy. So it's definitely a discussion with a health professional team, an allergy team. But I take your point that there is a sort of quite an emphasis on reintroduction there, and families may feel pressured to do that. So I think definitely a discussion needed with the family and the healthcare team.
I think it is really tricky, isn't it, Paul? I think you're right. I think each family will have to make those decisions individually.
Yeah.
I mean, I would hope that bringing up a child, plant-based, even though he wasn't at birth, we weren't at birth, that he would, have some of those sort of compassionate, ethical values that I've instilled in him, and knowing that he doesn't need animal products to survive or thrive, in fact, and hopefully he'll take that into adulthood, I think. I hope.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's the thing with bringing up children, isn't it? I guess you instill your values and things that you believe in to them, and then obviously they grow and develop, and as they grow up, will make their own decisions later on, and you just hope that they're going to be sensible, and that it might be different from what you believe, but I guess that's
Exactly,
up to everyone. Yeah.
Right. Shall we move on to over ones now then? And obviously in your book, you could maybe tell us a little bit more about the plant-powered little plate, and just give us an understanding about why children can't just go straight onto a plant-based version of the Eat Well guide if they're under 5. What's the plant-powered little plate about?
Okay, yeah, sure. So in my book, I talk about the plant-powered little plate because the Eat Well plate is designed for adults and children over the age of 5. And generally the main sort of reason for that in terms of the under 5s is the sort of energy density, and that it's not quite half, is it? But sort of almost half that plate is sort of fruits and vegetables, which obviously really important part of all our diets, including children's. But we need to make sure that children are getting enough fats, enough energy, enough protein, and so that's why the plate, the plant-powered little plate, is slightly modified in terms of that. It's mainly because of the energy density that young children under the age of 5 eat, smaller portions, and we need to make sure that the energy and protein and the sort of balance that they're getting is appropriate for their growth and to support their growth and development. So that's the main reason that there's a bit of a modification there.
Yeah, it's a brilliant book, Paula. Thank you for writing it for families. We love it. And, having gone through raising a very fussy eater, my son went from eating everything to being the fussiest eater, sort of about 18 months, 2 years. what advice would you give to plant-based parents who have got children who won't eat vegetables? That's the common one, isn't it? Why don't they eat anything green?
Yeah, that's definitely what you hear, isn't it? It's a very common, so just to reassure everyone, 18 months to 2 years is the sort of typical time if toddlers are going to become a little bit more fussy or selective with their eating. That is a really typical time, and often hear exactly what you said. They used to eat everything when they were babies or under 18 months, and now they'll only eat really particular things, and one day toddlers are so fickle. One day they love something, the next day, it's totally the wrong thing. How dare you serve it to them? And I think it's helpful to obviously know that you're not alone, that a lot of toddlers do go through this. So it's definitely not something you as a parent have done or haven't done. There are a couple of reasons why toddlers tend to be, sort of more fussy or sort of selective. And one of the things is that their growth rate slows down quite a bit in the sort of second and third year of life. So first year of life, in first 12 months, incredibly rapid growth. On average, babies triple their birth weight. They grow, 10 inches, 25 centimeters in length, double their brain size, so there's a huge amount of growth going on. And obviously they need all the nutrition to support that. And they have a real drive for hunger, for eating. The appetite is because of that hunger. Now, of course, they're still growing in the toddler years, but that growth rate is just much slower. And so the appetite tends to be less. They're also, a lot more independent. They are probably walking or running around. They're interested in playing. They're talking, learning how to say no to lots of things. And so I think their independence, their autonomy, their personality is definitely coming out. And then thirdly, another reason is something called neophobia, which is the fear of new foods. And this is thought to be a sort of evolutionary kind of throwback. So many, many, many hundreds of thousands of years ago, when we were sort of, roaming around, and there could be potentially lots of poisonous things around. When babies start walking and crawling, there was this effect. They think this effect that children become really wary and suspicious of foods. Of course, in the modern world, that's not really helpful. That they're now sort of wary and suspicious of every sort of food that you try and put in front of them, even something they used to like. But I think understanding a few reasons why children could become more fussy could help parents realize, okay, it's not me, it's not my cooking, it's just something that a lot of toddlers do go through, and to try and sort of ride it out a little bit. And other factors that can affect it as well are things like if they include cow's milk in their diet, or an alternative, actually, if they drink lots and lots of cow's milk, it's going to fill them up, and they won't necessarily have enough room for other foods. Some medical things like iron deficiency anemia or constipation can obviously have a knock-on effect on their appetite. So, there could be teething, lots of things like that can affect children's appetites. But I think in general, children's growth rate slowing down, their independence, and this sort of neophobia, which is not something that anyone can do or change or anything. Those are the main reasons why they tend to become a little bit more selective. So in terms of what people could do, it's understanding all these things. Okay, that's great, but what can I actually do about it? So some of the things are just extremely simple, and people think, oh, well, I'm already doing that. But they, I think, don't underestimate how important these things are. So eating together as a family, even if your child is, only eating the bread, there's loads of things on offer, but they only choose the bread. They're still being exposed to a lot of different food. They're seeing lots of other different food. They might touch it and then decide not to eat it, but that's all part of the food experience. So still offering the food. Don't sort of give up. Try family style foods. That can way of eating that can really help. So having everyone at the table and putting sort of different food options on the table, and people sort of dishing up. Obviously, an 18-month-old might need some help to sort of dish things up, but taking the pressure off and giving children a little bit of choice and autonomy themselves within. You can still decide what's on offer, but letting them to choose from within that can be a helpful way of exposing them to the food, and sort of just enjoying the food together as a family, and trying not to sort of focus too much on them and whether they're eating. And I think another helpful strategy is to try and think of your child's eating over a period of a few days or a week. So trying not to focus on every day or every particular meal, try to sort of zoom out a little bit. Okay, they during the week, they've eaten some bread, they've eaten, some beans on that day, they ate some fruit on that day, so trying to get an overall picture of the variety that they've had over that period of time, I think can be a bit more a helpful way of looking at it.
I think that's brilliant advice, because I think, for me anyway, when I stop stressing about it and stop, because you can actually sort of portray that stress over to your child, can't you? They pick up on that when the parents stress, and just relaxing and going, do you know what? They'll be fine. They're not going to be fussy forever, and they'll come out of this phase, because there's been so many phases already. What about things like, I used to hide vegetables in pasta sauce, chop that really fine, or even I remember having a blender in at one point to get all these vegetables in pasta sauce.
Sure. I mean, I generally don't recommend sort of hiding, but I think a pasta sauce is a useful way of, getting some veggies in, as long as children know what's in there. You're not sort of deliberately trying to sort of sneak it in without them knowing. I think it's fine to, grate carrots and tomatoes and all sorts of things into, a pasta sauce, for example, or a bolognese or something, and blend it a little bit, absolutely fine. Different ways of offering different forms of a vegetable. So, raw, cooked, roasted, fried, the air fryer, different ways of offering things can also help as well. Different, you don't have to go crazy on creating all these amazing shapes and everything, but just changing the shape of things can, introduce a different element to it. Getting children to help you in the kitchen, involving them in food preparation can be hugely helpful as well.
Definitely. Paula, can we delve into some of the nutrients you sort of touched on briefly, things like iron in particular? I mean, as GPs, we do see children, omnivorous children who can be iron deficient. Usually, I think that's because of their sort of fussy eating, or, as you mentioned, over drinking milk and eating less solids. Particularly, I guess, for the plant-based children, how would we ensure they don't become iron deficient?
Yeah, I think it's really important to look at iron, and also, first of all, to say, like you said, iron deficiency anemia is really common. It's the most common nutrient deficiency worldwide in all eating patterns. So whether children eat meat or not, iron deficiency is really, really common. And one of the main reasons for that is drinking too much milk, and that has a number of effects. So it decreases the opportunity to eat anything else. So although milk is a liquid, it's actually more helpful to think of it as a food, because it is so filling. So it can really fill up children's tummies. It's very, it's easy to just drink something than to eat. It fills you up very quickly, so it can crowd out other foods. And then also we know that an excessive amount of calcium, which comes with drinking too much cow's milk, or a dairy alternative that's fortified, that can interfere with the absorption of iron. So I'm not talking about normal quantities of milk. It's fine, or dairy alternative. We'll come on to calcium in a second, but it's a balance between, offering enough. We want children to have enough calcium, of course, to protect their bones and their bone health, but not to have excessive quantities that it means that their appetite is really taken up with a lot of that milk, and that it could potentially decrease the absorption of iron. Yeah. So with iron-rich foods, as I said before, offering them, starting, from when they're introducing solids, thinking about iron-rich foods and introducing those early on. And then the other thing is that trying to offer foods that have got lots of vitamin C. So basically most fruit and vegetables. Vitamin C helps with the absorption of iron. There's also some other vitamins like beta-carotene, which is in, carrots and orange and red and yellow foods, which has also been shown to increase iron absorption. So eating fruits and vegetables together with iron-rich foods really can make a difference in terms of iron absorption. And I always recommend to parents to try and include an iron-rich food at all their meals, if possible, or as many of them as you can. So on the sort of plant powered little plates, I talk about iron-rich foods and how to try and include those in all your meals, and sort of start with your iron-rich food when you're thinking about what to offer your little one, and then sort of build your meal around that. So iron fortified cereals are really helpful for little ones, and when you're starting to introduce solids, beans, lentils, pulses, peas, some green vegetables, some dried fruits like apricots, raisins, things like that. Nuts have also got small amounts of iron, seeds. So I think all of these things, which are really important parts of the plant-based diet, can really help and add up to giving little ones enough iron. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And yes, let's move on to calcium then, since we sort of touched on it, because I think a lot of people, even healthcare professionals, still think of calcium and immediately think dairy. So if we're saying we're raising plant-based children, what other considerations should we be giving if we're not having dairy in our diets?
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. I think it is definitely the sort of default. You sort of immediately, or health professionals in general and parents often think about calcium, dairy is kind of the first thing that they think about. And obviously that is a source of calcium, but it's definitely not the only source. I recommend a calcium fortified dairy alternative. So something like a soya drink or an oat based drink, one that's fortified. So for parents to use that for their little ones over cereal, porridge, that type of thing. And they can offer it as a drink as well. Just in terms of thinking about how much. So in the UK, the recommendations for calcium for 1 to 3 year olds is 350 milligrams of calcium a day. 4 to 6 year olds, 450 milligrams. So when thinking about sort of the amount of dairy alternative to offer, for example, 300 mils for a 1 to 3 year old and about 400 mils for 4 to 6 year old is going to be sort of covering those amounts. And that's even if that's without sort of offering any other foods that may have calcium in them. So we're not talking about large quantities. So, and also things like a calcium fortified dairy alternative yogurt is another option. So those are really concentrated forms that are, very easy and palatable for parents to use. Of course, there are lots of foods that are naturally contain calcium as well. So oranges have got quite a lot of calcium, dried things like figs, dried figs, dried apricots, things like that. And then also some of the green vegetables, so broccoli, kale, spring greens, things like that. Toddlers are probably not going to be guzzling up huge amounts of kale and green vegetables and things. But I think it's important that they can still contribute, that they do contain significant amounts of calcium that are well absorbed. But yeah, I think it's also important to think about the portion sizes. So sometimes you'll see, vegan adults talking about, it's you can get all the calcium you need from green vegetables, and that may be the case for an adult eating a lot of green vegetables. But I just think it's important for parents to realize that although that can definitely contribute, it's probably not going to be providing the vast majority of the calcium that young children need. And we do know from the studies that vegan children, like the Vici study I talked about before that was done in Germany, they looked at 1 to 3 year olds, and the vegan group of children did have the lowest calcium intake. All the groups actually, the calcium intake wasn't ideal, but the vegan group did have the lowest. So it's not something that I think parents need to necessarily be overly concerned about, but definitely aware of, okay, let's see where's the calcium coming from, and just make sure that there are significant sources there.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, we as a family, I think, get a lot of our calcium from tofu. We have
Yes.
calcium set tofu. I mean, I'm happy to mention brands, but
yeah.
in particular, Cauldron has got very high calcium levels.
Yes, it does.
I mean, Claire and I often speak about tofu and soya and how, I think still within healthcare professionals' minds, there's this issue about safety and hormones and isoflavones. Could you talk a little bit about, are there safe levels for children, and, what can we advise parents on feeding their children tofu and soya-based products?
Yeah, sure. So soy-based products like soy milk, soy yogurt, tofu, edamame beans, things like that, absolutely safe for children to be eating. There are some studies looking at, and there's a large review that I talk about in my book that looked at sort of amounts in terms for adults and for children based on studies, particularly that have been done in Asian countries where they consume quite a lot of soya, generally more than we do in Western countries. And, in terms of safety, they found no effect on, for example, children's hormones or the age that the age that girls start menstruating, things like that. So, and in fact, there have been beneficial effects that have been found for girls in particular, and having soya at a young age, and prevention of breast cancer. So I don't think parents need to be worried. I mean, I still, whenever I mention something about soya, or, that it's a myth or whatever, it's definitely safe, I still get people, saying they'll never give their child soya, or, how can I be saying this, or things like that. But really the evidence is there that it's safe, that there isn't evidence that of it not being safe. There's anecdotal things and sort of things that people say, or maybe some animal studies and things like that cannot be extrapolated to children. So in terms of the amount, I generally say about 2 or 3 portions a day, not because there's any sort of worry or concern of if in terms of safety, if parents give more than that. And the review really goes into detail and says that the recommendations they make in terms of the amount was based on not crowding out too many other foods in the diet, and allowing for, variety of foods to be eaten, not a sort of safety issue or worry at all. And that's what they sort of looked at when formulating their conclusions.
That's so good to hear, because I think there's still so much misinformation, and I think things like social media and that doesn't actually help the situation when you read these things and they're not evidence-based. And good to hear, because we love tofu.
Yeah. No, I know. And, tofu it's just such a healthy food for so many reasons. Obviously it's a great source of protein, of calcium, and it's just so versatile. You can use it in so many different ways. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic food to include.
Right. So we've touched a lot on just how absolutely complete a plant-based diet can be, but we did want to ask you, because it came up in terms of breastfeeding mums, for example, that they should take an omega-3 supplement. If you're bringing up your child plant-based and they're not having a source of omega-3s from fish, should they be having a supplement, or indeed, any other supplement? Because you're probably only going to want to give them one supplement a day, really. Can you package it up somehow?
Sure.
What should we do about that?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of, just wanting to say just in general about supplements, that sometimes that's viewed as a really negative thing. So sometimes parents or people might say, oh, well, this can't be a very good diet if you're having to supplement. But I think people don't recognize that, in an omnivorous diet, we recommend, certainly in the UK and northern sort of Europe, we recommend a vitamin D supplement for all children, regardless of their eating pattern. And then times when they're a bit fussier, an iron supplement might be useful. And we eat plenty of fortified foods, which is in effect like supplementing. So I think it's a very sort of black or white, or sort of thinking of it as supplementing is bad. I really wouldn't think of it like that. So for plant-based children, I mean, like you said, Claire, a lot of children, a lot of toddlers may not be eating oily fish, that even if they're eating fish, they might, I guess they might eat salmon or something like that, but they're not many children that are going to be, sort of tucking into loads of oily fish. So yeah, that is, another consideration. So if children are not eating oily fish and they're not eating eggs that may have been supplemented, where the hens may have been supplemented with an omega-3 supplement, then I do recommend an omega-3 supplement, so like a DHA, EPA supplement from algal oil, particularly for under 2s and for pregnant and breastfeeding women. So the evidence isn't massively strong for over 2s and adults in terms of taking a DHA or an EPA supplement, because we just feel that it's felt that those sort of vulnerable age under 2s, where there's a huge amount of brain growth and things going on, and we know that there's a lot of DHA, that type of fat in the brain of little ones under that age. The algal oil supplements can be a bit more on the costly side. So I always say to parents, if you're able to, and it fits in with your family budget, I would recommend continuing supplementing if you're able to. But if that's, something that you really need to consider, that under 2s, pregnant and breastfeeding, I think are the sort of the times when I would say definitely yes. We know that, just to explain to everyone, because I think omega-3s can be really confusing to lots of people. So we know that So there's a type of omega-3 fat which has got this long name, but it's called ALA, alpha-linolenic acid, and there are lots of plant-based plant forms of that. So you get them in lots of different seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, and things like walnuts, and the oils of all of those things as well. And then what happens in the body is that the body converts that ALA fat through a series of steps to the sort of DHA and EPA fats that I mentioned before, and we think that they seem to be the sort of active form, so they seem to have the most benefits around the body. But what we don't know is exactly how much of that top one, that ALA, is converted down to those other fats. And there's sort of various studies and reports as to sort of how much of that is converted and also how efficiently that's done. So there's lots of sort of different studies looking at that. And that's why in those sort of particularly vulnerable group, because we're not 100% sure about how much of that is converted, that those groups are sort of recommended to supplement with the end product, with the one at the end of the chain. But of course, including things like walnuts and seeds and those oils are in the diet of adults, children, everyone is plant-based, is obviously a really, really good idea. And some of it is converted, but we're just not sure exactly how much.
And I don't think I ate oily fish or omega-3s when I was growing up as a supplement, and
you're fine.
I've done all
okay. Exactly. I can't remember eating a huge amount of oily fish when I was growing up either. So yeah,
really good point.
I didn't mention any other supplements. So that the DHA and EPA is one, the omega-3s is one to think about, and for over one. So generally, what with under ones, babies, either they would be getting breast milk and getting those fats from their mum if the mum is supplementing as well, or from an infant formula. So it's generally over the age of one that plant-based health professionals recommends as starting to supplement. And then another supplement, which I have mentioned before, vitamin B12, that is something that I would definitely recommend supplementing and starting when a baby's about 7 or 8 months. Of course, they will be getting some still from breast milk if mum is supplementing, or an infant formula. But as the babies start to eat more and rely less on milk for their nutrition through from 6 to 12 months, there's a sort of gradual increase in food and gradual decrease in their milk intake. So that's why I'd recommend a vitamin B12 supplement there. And there are no, vitamin B12 is water soluble. There are no toxic upper levels that have been noted. I still wouldn't recommend sort of mega doses or quantities, but giving, even if you think your little one's getting a bit more than maybe needed, their body will absorb what they need, and we definitely want to make sure that they are getting enough. So it's better to supplement than to not. And then another one to consider is iodine, also for over the age of 1. So iodine is the main sources in the sort of general UK diet are dairy products and fish, particularly white fish, and some in eggs as well. So of course, if someone is plant-based, they wouldn't be eating any of those. Seaweed is another source, which is of course plant-based, but the amounts in seaweed can be excessive as well. And iodine is one of those nutrients where we definitely don't want people to be having too much. We don't want them to be having too little. So to make sure that they're having sort of enough, but not too much, a supplement is a good way of ensuring that. There are also lots of fortified drinks and things now that lots of the dairy alternative milks or drinks have got iodine added. So that's another way of obtaining it. In some countries, they have iodized salt. Sometimes in some countries it's mandatory or very widely available. It's not as widely available here in the UK. I don't generally see it in the supermarket, or a mum did tell me the other day she found it in a Tesco's, but generally iodized salt is not the sort of generally available salt, and obviously we don't want children to be having significant amounts of salt. So yeah, that could be another way, but in the UK I don't think it's a really reliable way of supplementing.
Great, thanks for that overview of the supplements.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you if you had any comments about what's a more difficult area, which is the social side for children of being plant-based. And I think that parents are going to be worried about striking a balance between their child fitting in by eating the same as everyone else. And if they decide that they're going to bring them up plant-based, what happens when they go to a children's party or just even, with a school dinner, balanced against the idea that if they go to those kind of events, they say, oh yeah, you can have unhealthy foods when you go to those things, that they might come home and sort of almost be addicted to the alternatives. And I think this is really difficult for parents, because they really don't want to make their children stand out or say, oh, when Johnny goes to the party, please don't give him any egg sandwich. So have you got any thoughts on how to make that a less painful process while still getting really the best outcome for your child?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, I think it's a really tricky one. Parenting is in so many ways, and navigating the whole sort of food, eating out, parties is another, another area that's really difficult for parents. So obviously, don't want to make it any more difficult for them. So I think it's really important to strike a balance, and I guess that's going to be different or look different to different families. So on the one hand, obviously you don't want your child to be sort of left out or stand out, but and you want them to be included. But on the other hand, you don't necessarily want them to be eating all these unhealthy foods. I don't think there's much risk of them sort of, certainly with going to parties and then coming home and being sort of addicted to these foods. I don't think there's much risk of that. Maybe they'd be asking them for them more, or ask. And I think it's about having a conversation. Those you don't want to talk about sort of treats or sort of putting foods too much on a pedestal. But I think it's about just talking to a little one about these foods that maybe they're occasional foods, or maybe they're foods that you don't necessarily have every day, or things like that, and trying to strike a balance. And it's the same as for example, I don't generally have any fizzy drinks in the house, because that's just not something that I want my children to be drinking on a daily basis. But of course, they could go after school and buy themselves, a fizzy drink every day if they wanted to. But there's obviously some element of trust there. But if we had some people coming round for a gathering, or some sort of, then there might be some slightly different food there and different drinks and stuff. So I think it's just about striking that balance, and that it's every family, I guess, has to decide what they feel is an acceptable level in terms of their child going to a party and letting them just have anything there, or asking the host if there can be some plant-based options that would be available, so that they're not sort of sitting there with their individual separate meal, but maybe there's some plant-based options for everyone. Or maybe you could, as a parent, you could offer and say, oh, can I make a few plant-based sandwiches, or some kind of pastry that's plant-based that everyone could eat. So it's not seen as this sort of like, ooh, I don't want that, sort of separate, but it's seen as sort of part of the whole offering, I guess.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I've done that before, Paula, and people love the food that we bring.
Exactly.
I've always said this: plant-based food is delicious, and you're not deprived, and you're not missing out on anything. In fact,
colourful, so children love that. I think we often assume, okay, it's a party, we'll only offer pastries, crisps, only that sort of thing. But actually, children will eat anything. Just a few weeks ago, my daughter had a Halloween party here, and I was terrified of all these 14, 15-year-olds being in our house. And obviously we had crisps and things available, but I also put out some cucumbers, some carrots, some hummus, some things like that. I promise you, it got gobbled up, and they were asking, is there any more cucumber and things like that. So I think sometimes, children will surprise you. If it's on offer, they'll likely go for it and try it.
Absolutely, yeah. Plant-based baking and cakes are just as good, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I inflicted quite a lot of stuff on people when we went round for a New Year party for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
Paula, your book, The Plant-Powered Little People, is an absolutely fantastic guide for plant-based nutrition for children. And I think you've really brought it to life by talking to us today. I think it's going to be an absolute must-have for any parent that's bringing up a plant-based baby or child. And also, we haven't talked too much about them, but you've got some recipe ideas in the back and snack ideas that we were just talking about now. And following on from this, we would love to hear what you're actually cooking up for dinner tonight for your family.
Okay, brilliant. So yeah, tonight just thinking about what they normally love. So they normally love pastas. So any pasta I know is generally gonna be a hit. So I think I'm gonna be making. I've got like a green pasta in here, which is a pasta with a sauce that's made from edamame and fresh coriander and lime and things. So it's quite a sort of fresh taste, and it's a nice way of offering edamame beans that's not sort of the actual bean, so it's blended into a sauce. So I think I'll be making the green pasta tonight, which is one of their favorites. They also love like an orzo with roasted vegetables, which is actually one of Ella's, Deliciously Ella's recipes. They also love things like a bolognese, a lentil bolognese. They love, I made like a tofu fried rice the other night, which they really enjoy that as well. My youngest daughter, who's the one who wanted to be vegetarian 4 years ago, she's only recently come around to mushrooms. So she actually said, "Oh, Mum, can you make that mushroom stroganoff?" So, trying out different things. And yeah, it has taught me to be patient and, to offer different things. And sometimes it won't be their thing. They'll still eat it, but it won't necessarily be their favorite. Other times it's definitely one of their favorites. But yeah, offering a variety is always good. So yeah, those are some of our favorites.
Lovely.
Great. Daisy, what are you going to cook up tonight?
What am I cooking? It's quick tonight again, my quick meals. My family are obsessed with bao buns at the moment, Paula. I don't know if you've come across them.
My youngest loves bao buns, dumplings, dim sum, any of those types of foods, absolutely loves them.
They're very child friendly, aren't they? So you can pick them up individually, but you can actually buy them unfilled in Tesco or some supermarkets. So we do our own filling. So I'll do crispy tofu in there. I was telling Claire earlier, the tender stem broccoli is actually a perfect fit for a bao bun, I've realised.
Oh, perfect.
So they go in there, and then I chop up some peanuts, and my son's older. No choking hazards, thankfully, so he can have peanuts, some sriracha sauce, coriander. So we make our own little bao buns. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. With the different toppings, that's nice as well. I think meals where you've got sort of a base, like the bao buns or like a wrap or something, and then you have different toppings, they can work really, really well. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Claire? What are you having tonight?
One for Paula's daughter, I think, because I'm going to make, it's a very winter recipe, but it's an Irish stew. So it'll have some stout in it and portobello mushrooms. So the main meat of the dish is the portobellos. So it's cooking up a kind of, a stout broth and putting in parsnips and carrots and potatoes in there, a little bit of tomato puree, garlic, those kind of winter herbs, thyme and sage, and then just at the last minute searing the mushrooms and popping them in there.
That sounds good. Mushrooms opens up a whole load of recipes.
It does. It really does. Yeah.
Some interesting years ahead, Paula.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We have learned so much from speaking with you and from your book, which we would highly recommend. Claire's already bought 4 copies to share with everyone she knows who's got children. So we'll put a link to the show in the show notes to your book, and would recommend everyone buy a copy. Thank you, Paula.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been so lovely chatting to you today. And yeah, I've really loved my time here with you guys.
Thank you.